Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Thank you so much. So many people reached out and checked on me after my last Put It Into Practice episode, where I shared a little bit about my own struggles with parenting and mindfulness. And I want to tell you guys, your support and reaching out and letting me know you totally get it, you've been there too, just means the world to me. So I'm always interested in hearing from you and getting your feedback about the topics, about the episodes. And if you have any questions that you would like me to answer on upcoming episodes, please send me an email, lisa@lisamustard.com. Find me on Instagram, send me a direct message. You can also go over to my website. There is a place to connect with me on a contact form. And my website is lisamustard.com, and you'll just want to look for the contact tab at the top of the website, and you can send me a message there too. I'll put all those ways to reach me in the show notes. But I do want to share that after I recorded that episode, I felt like a weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. And I think a lot of it had to do with being a little scared to be honest and vulnerable with my audience. And that goes back to my own stuff, of course, once again, and probably a little bit about my attachment style, which I'm going to share with you guys, two types of attachment styles in this Put It Into Practice episode. And then the next Saturday, next Put It Into Practice episode, I'm going to talk more about the other two. So I tend to have a anxious, preoccupied attachment style. And I think that a lot of my own, like I said, stuff from my childhood kind of plays into me being vulnerable and open and sharing and just the feedback I might get or not get. So I'm going to talk to you about what those are, what these two, we're going to talk about secure attachment as well as anxious, preoccupied attachment in this episode. But before I jump into that, I want to just remind you guys that mindfulness app is my go-to for meditation, for talks, for stress relief, all the good stuff. You know, I start my day with just a few minutes of mindfulness practice, and it is a game changer. And I had an episode with one of my kids earlier this week, and I instead of like emotionally reacting, which is my go-to in the past, I was like, nope, Lisa, you are going to practice your deep breathing right now. Right now, you are aware that you're being triggered, and instead of reacting to what she is saying, you are going to take 3 deep breaths. And let me tell you guys, by the end of deep breath number 2, I really did feel better. So if you're on the fence about this whole deep breathing thing being the real deal, it is. And you don't have to get a mindfulness app to do the deep breathing. When you find yourself being emotionally triggered or something's going on, and you just take 3 deep breaths. By the time you get to that second breath, I'm willing to bet you're going to feel better. At least you're going to feel better enough to calm down and to decide how you want to react and respond to whatever is going on. All right. Well, let's talk about attachment styles. So have you heard about attachment styles? Do you know what they are? A lot of folks in the mental health field will be talking about them on social media. And since I brought it up last week, I thought, hey, now is a good time to talk about attachment styles. So attachment styles refer to the patterns of interpersonal relationships and emotional bonds formed by individuals during childhood and throughout their lives. And these patterns are shaped by the interactions individuals have with their primary caregivers, typically their parents or other important figures during their formative years. A lot of people will say that attachment styles are developed between ages 0 to 6. I'm going to throw out there that they can be constantly evolving and shifting. At least that's been my experience. So there are 4 main types of attachment styles. There's secure, there's anxious, preoccupied, dismissive, avoidant, and fearful, avoidant. And the attachment styles are categorized based on how individuals perceive and respond to relationships, emotions, and intimacy. And we're going to cover 2 in this episode, and I want to keep it short so you can put it into practice. So people with a secure attachment will feel comfortable with emotional intimacy and trust that their partner will be responsive to their needs. They are comfortable expressing their emotions and do not fear rejection or abandonment. Okay, so that's the number 1 we're going to talk about. Number 2, anxious, preoccupied attachment. So that's individuals with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style are often overly concerned with their relationships and fear rejection or abandonment. They may become clingy or needy in their relationships and have difficulty trusting their partner's love and commitment. Now, I'm going to throw it out there that I lean towards anxious, preoccupied attachment just based on things that happened in my childhood. And I think that it really kind of showed up a lot in my teens and early 20s. And it wasn't until my late 20s when I went to therapy that I learned how to form secure attachments. So let's talk a little bit about what a secure attachment can look like. So here is a scenario that is where secure attachment is primary. So let's call her Sophie. She's a 25-year-old woman, has been dating her partner Alex for over a year. They have a strong connection and enjoy spending time together, but they also have their own hobbies and interests. When they have disagreements, they are able to communicate openly and work towards finding a resolution. And Sophie feels comfortable expressing her emotions and needs to Alex and trusts that he will be responsive to them. One day, Sophie receives some unexpected news from work that leaves her feeling stressed and overwhelmed. She immediately calls Alex and shares her feelings with him. Alex listens attentively and offers words of support, reassuring her that he's there for her and will do whatever he can to help her through this difficult time. Sophie feels grateful and relieved to have Alex as a partner, knowing that she can rely on him for emotional support. She feels secure in their relationship, knowing that they have a strong bond and can work through any challenges that come their way. So, a secure attachment style is typically developed in childhood through consistent, responsive, and nurturing caregiving. And here are some factors that contribute to the development of a secure attachment. So, number one, responsive and consistent caregiving. Children who have consistent, responsive, and nurturing caregivers who meet their physical and emotional needs develop a secure attachment style. Number two, positive interactions and emotional support. Children who experience positive interactions with their caregivers and receive emotional support, such as comfort when upset or praise when successful, develop a sense of security in their relationships. Number three, safe and predictable environment. Children who grow up in a safe and predictable environment with routines and consistent boundaries are more likely to develop a secure attachment style. And number four, parental sensitivity and attunement. Caregivers who are sensitive and attuned to their children's needs, emotions, and cues are better able to respond appropriately and build a secure attachment with their child. Now, I think that as a mom, as a parent, I want to be all of these things, consistent, responsive, and nurturing to our children, to our girls. And so I work really hard on, developing these factors. And sometimes I don't do it very well. Sometimes I lose my stuff and I can get triggered. And that's when my anxious, preoccupied attachment issues tend to pop up. So I'm really working on emotional reactivity, like I know I've already shared with you guys. But, you don't have to be perfect in these four things. You don't have to, get them 200% of the time. If you are aware and you are striving to be better and you're having conversations with your kids and maybe, you are attuned to their emotional needs and you're giving them the support and you let them know that you're there for them. And we're doing the best that we can. We have a lot going on in our worlds with work and with other relationships, but you don't have to be perfect when it comes to these things. So don't worry if you're not perfect. Just aim to do better. Okay, so the next type of attachment that I want to talk about is the one that, like I said, I struggle with: anxious, preoccupied attachment. So here's a scenario. We'll call her Maria. We could call her Lisa. But let's call her Maria. Maria, a 28-year-old woman, has been dating her partner, John, for several months. They have a strong connection and enjoy spending time together, but Maria often feels anxious and insecure in the relationship. She worries that John will lose interest in her or abandon her and seeks constant reassurance from him. One day, John doesn't respond to Maria's text message right away, which triggers her anxiety. She starts to worry that he's upset with her or doesn't care about her anymore. And Maria begins to send John multiple messages and calls, seeking reassurance that he's still interested in her. When John finally responds, he's surprised by the number of messages from Maria and feels overwhelmed by her need for constant reassurance. He tells her that he's still interested in her, but needs some space to process what's happened. She feels devastated and even more anxious, feeling that he will abandon her. Her anxious, preoccupied attachment style is causing her to feel overwhelming anxiety and insecurity in her relationship. Her need for constant reassurance is putting a strain on the relationship and causing John to feel overwhelmed and unsure about their future together. So, how did Maria develop this anxious, preoccupied attachment? Or how did Lisa develop this anxious, preoccupied attachment? Might be the better question. But it's typically developed in a childhood as a result of inconsistent or unpredictable caregiving. Children who experience inconsistent or unresponsive caregiving may develop a sense of mistrust and anxiety about relationships, leading them to seek constant reassurance and validation from others. So, let me talk about this a little bit more, the factors that may contribute. So, inconsistent caregiving, children who experience inconsistent or unpredictable caregiving, where their caregivers may sometimes be responsive and at other times be unresponsive, may develop an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. Now, I'm going to share a little bit about my childhood here, but I also want you to know that at almost 50, I've worked through a lot of this. I'm going to talk to you about it as a way to give you some context to, what this might look like.
Are you thinking of starting a podcast this year? Or perhaps you're a seasoned podcaster and you're looking for someone to take the podcast production off your plate. If so, we are currently taking on new clients and would love to be your production partner of choice. My name is Chelsea Weaver and I am the owner of Chelsea Weaver Podcasting. I offer podcast startup packages, audio and video editing, plus show notes, graphics, and reels. So consider us a one-stop shop for all your podcast needs. A little bit about me, I have over 5+ years of experience in audio and video production. I am an Army veteran who served in Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. I partner with other female veterans who are also experienced in podcast production and social media services. We'd love to chat with you about your podcasting and social media needs and can be reached at chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. That's CHELSEA WEAVER podcasting.com.
So, when I was a child, my parents divorced when I was about 10 or 11. And my father pretty much was the most inconsistent caregiver you could imagine. He wasn't around. He wasn't interested. He didn't seem to care. And he wasn't responsive to me. And I'm not going to speak for my sister, but I'm guessing she would probably agree with me with this. So that was hard when you have a parent that's, inconsistent, incapable, unpredictable to be a caregiver. Oh my gosh, you never know what you're going to get, right? So it was tough. The next one, the other factor is neglect or abandonment. Children who experience neglect or abandonment where their caregivers are emotionally or physically absent may develop an anxious, preoccupied attachment style as a way to cope with their feelings of insecurity and lack of support. So yes, once again, my father, not around, neglect, abandonment, whatever you want to call it. He was not emotionally or physically present, never there. So he was not around. I remember, there were times when he was going to have us for the weekend and then, he canceled plans. We were let down. We were sad. We were frustrated. We were probably really pissed. We just didn't know how to show it at that young of an age. I'm trying to think of other times. I remember, being around him and having him like kind of pawn us off on people to take care of us, even though we were there to spend time with him over the weekend. That was kind of weird. I don't think about that. What else? Times that he said he was going to show up at things and he didn't. In high school, I remember him saying he was going to come to something that I was going to be at and be a part of, and he didn't come. My memory's kind of fuzzy. I can't remember everything because I don't know. It's been so long. I don't necessarily have the best memory, and that could be a trauma response. I'm not sure. But the other factor is trauma or abuse. And children who experience trauma or abuse may develop an anxious, preoccupied attachment style as a way to cope with stress and uncertainty of their environment. Now, I was never abused in the sense of hit, physical abuse, sexual abuse, none of that. And so I don't quite know where this falls into, but I'm going to share it anyway. So trauma that I did experience, I would say, is when I was in high school, my father was investigated for fraud, for white collar crimes. And in the newspapers, when I was in high school and on the radio and on the news, I felt like, or it was the name of the company that he was president of was our last name. And so my last name which my maiden name is Friedlander. You can Google it if you want, find out all about Friedlander Financial in the 80s and what happened. But it was like every single day when the trial was going on or something was going on, our name was in the paper. And so I was going to school every day. And I don't know if my peers read the papers, but I know their parents did. And I felt like all eyes were on me. And that was a very that felt really weird when you're like 16, 17, and you just feel like, people are looking at you, they're wondering, what's going on, they're judging you. And I had a hard time separating that my dad did these things, I didn't do these things. And I'm just sharing with you guys my experience. I'm trying to be honest, I'm trying to be real, I'm trying to, share with you the best that I can about what it was like. But once again, it was a long time ago, so my memory's a little bit fuzzy. So that was traumatic. I mean, nobody hit me, nobody abused me, but that was a very traumatic experience. And then when I was 18, 19, my father was sentenced to federal prison, and that was a traumatic event as well for me to be a part of that and to be asked to go to the trial. And I remember the attorney asked us to go to the trial because he thought that would show, look, he's a parent. He has children. He's not a I don't know if that was for him to go out on bail or what, or to be released on bond, because I think they thought he was a flight risk. And I remember just rolling my eyes and being like, I haven't talked to this man or seen him or had any type of relationship with him in so long. And you now want us to come to this trial and be there as like character judgment for him. And I just, it was so ironic, right? So for me, here I am, anxious, preoccupied attachment all day long. And then the last factor is family or cultural values. Some families or cultures may value emotional expressiveness and dependency on others, leading children to develop an anxious, preoccupied attachment style as a way to conform to these values. I don't necessarily know if I experienced that. I don't remember being rewarded, with air quotes around it, for being very emotionally expressive. In fact, I recall not being very emotionally expressive as a teen. Probably kept a lot in, did not talk to anybody, didn't want to talk to anybody. In fact, I remember putting a lot of my energy into, being in activities and, hanging out with friends. I had a really great group of friends. Social support was good. I had a great boyfriend in high school. His family was very supportive of me and what was going on in my family. In fact, this is funny. My boyfriend's mom went to high school with my dad. Very small, small world in Richmond. So it's kind of, if you're listening, you know who you are. So yeah, I don't remember that being a problem. In fact, I was probably not expressive enough. So there you have it. There you have all my factors of how I developed an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. And when it started to become a problem for me was really in college, it's, I probably didn't have like the healthiest of relationships, very wishy-washy, very, didn't know what I wanted. And then in my late 20s, when I finally met my future husband, a lot of this stuff started to show up. I was looking for constant reassurance that he cared for me. I was looking for constant reassurance that he wanted to be with me. And I think like it got to be too much for him. And at one point, and probably, I tell you guys that he broke up with me, and that was the best thing that he ever did, because I decided to go to therapy and take a look at my stuff. And we talked a lot about my family of origin issues and with my dad and my attachment style. And I learned through that process of therapy how to shift my attachment style. And I thought I was doing really well until I became a parent of a teenager. And I'm laughing because, our stuff is always there. Our stuff stays with us. And it doesn't make us horrible people, or, we're unhealthy that we haven't like dealt with it and moved through it. You guys, stuff's going to be with us for a long time, and it's going to trickle in when you don't expect it to. And it could pop up and you're like, where the heck did this come from? You got triggered. And, some of this stuff from your, when you were a kid pops up, but that's pretty normal. That's the human experience. We're emotional beings, and it's okay to have these things pop up that maybe you hadn't thought about in 30 years. But what's most important is that you pay attention to them, and that you are aware that it's happening, and that instead of trying to like, brush it under the rug or shove it down and not pay attention to it, pay attention to it and address it. You are worth it. You are worth having better relationships. You are worth having a better partnership or a better marriage or whatever it is that you're going through, because attachment styles are going to show up in current relationships. And if you're struggling with that, or if there's issues going on in your relationships, then I would recommend, talking to a counselor, working on these things, kicking around the stuff that you grew up with and trying to understand, making peace with it, or whatever it is that you need to do to heal yourself and to move forward in your life. Okay, so we've covered secure attachment, and then we've also covered anxious, preoccupied attachment. So, in the next Put It Into Practice episode, we are going to cover the other two, which are dismissive avoidant attachment and fearful avoidant attachment. But in the meantime, if you guys want to take a look at this stuff, understand your past, understand your attachment styles, and you're ready to find a therapist, I've included some resources in the show notes that can help you find a therapist if you are ready to get going. So go ahead, check those out. So it's important to stress that these episodes are not meant to take the place of any work you're doing with your therapist or doctor. In fact, please run these ideas by your counselor or doctor before you act on them to make sure you're ready for them or even a fit for the suggestions that I mentioned. And I can't stress that enough, that each person is unique and their situation is unique. So please talk to your doctor or therapist before starting anything new that I might be suggesting. And the therapy show with Lisa Mustard and the information provided by me is solely intended for informational and entertainment purposes and is not a substitute for advice, diagnosis, or treatment regarding medical or mental health conditions. Although I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, the views expressed on this site, on my podcast, or any related content should not be taken for medical or psychiatric advice. Always consult your physician before making any decisions related to your physical or mental health. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.